Right, so last night the House of Lords once again had to be relied upon to see common sense and justice prevail. It's the wickedly evil Stop the Boats Bill, one of Rishi Sunak's 5 missions to deliver this side of the general election, lest he suffer a horrible and gruesome fate. Suffered several defeats, and quite honestly, thank God when you hear what the government was actually trying to get passed. As many of you will be aware, there are huge implications to Cruella Braverman's illegal migration bill passing, in that it is in violation of the European Human Rights Convention, the EHRC, which, despite the name, is a globally recognised piece of legislation. The Human Rights Act is a central tenet of all legislation passed in the UK. All legislation has to comply with it for it to be legal. This country is, as a signatory of the Human Rights Act, we help write the damn thing. British lawyers are involved in its wording and structure. It's very much something we in this country should be very proud of, be happily compliant in. Sadly, this most extremist of right-wing conservative governments hate it, especially Cruella Braverman, and her illegal migration bill is not human rights compliant. When bills are written and presented in a posh white paper, as they all are, it has to say it complies with the Human Rights Act on the front page. Braverman couldn't do that with this. Virtually unheard of. Yet still they sought to get it passed, despite potentially being ruled illegal going forwards by the European Court of Human Rights, the ECHR, not to be confused with the horribly similar EHRC acronym. Anyway, the bill arrived at the House of Lords, and after Braverman's shenanigans regarding the anti-protest bill just recently, forcing through primary legislation that the Lords had binned as secondary legislation instead, which couldn't be debated, you just get the feeling her name is mud around that place these days, which may not have helped her case here, but still, the illegal migration bill, Sunak, stop the boats bill, stop the boats, stop the boats, he likes to say it a lot, doesn't he, had to progress through the Lords, and they've crucified it. In what is probably the biggest blow to it, and what might have been the most troublesome bit to get passed for the Tories, the Lords have passed an amendment to restrict the scope of the bill to ensure it is compliant with international law, including, but not exclusively to, the Human Rights Act and the Refugee Convention, which we are also signatories of, something sure to have Braverman wailing. For a start, it'll mean anyone turning up in a small boat to seek asylum now can't be detained and immediately deported to Rwanda like the Tories wanted, because that violates the right to claim asylum, waiving all forms of punishment in the country they land in. I know it's a difficult thing for some knuckle-dragging racists to get their head around, but if you come and claim asylum, it doesn't matter how you enter the country. It's not illegal. It gets waived. Article 14 of the Human Rights Act also protects such people regardless of their race, skin, colour, religion, sexual origin, or disability being discriminated against on that basis as well. So it's a double whammy. Especially notable that even Conservative Lords were against the government on this as well and backed this amendment. This wasn't the only defeat the Tories suffered in the Lords, though. Incredibly, Sunak and Braverman wanted to remove an exemption for victims of slavery from being deported to Rwanda in the same way as every other person entering the country illegally. The right to asylum supersedes any criminality regarding entering the country, as I said, and deport them to Rwanda too, just like everyone else, even if there's an active police investigation in place at the time. And in spite of the additional protection under the Human Rights Act, people in this situation have the right to freedom from slavery and forced labour covered in Article 4 of the Human Rights Act. But the Lords felt they needed to make a special case, though, regarding slavery, when in theory, forcing the bill to follow international legal requirements for signatories of, that they'd already voted through an amendment on, which should have naturally included such an aspect, should horrify people that they felt they needed to point this out in particular to the Tories on slavery of all things in 2023. This had to be hammered home to Sunak's government. It should horrify people. So what now for Sunak and Braverman then? She's been looking at this for years with her long-standing links to Rwanda and their president, and Sunak has nailed his colours to the mast regarding stopping the boats, stop the boats, stop the boats. There's something he has to achieve before the next election. Yet now he's failing pretty badly at it. Talk of pulling out of the EHRC has resurfaced naturally, but you have to realise, just as the Tories and anyone else dragging their knuckles in a tizzy over this have to realise, that every piece of legislation written since we signed up to this in 1950, or when it came into effect in 1953, has this Human Rights Act as a central underpinning tenet. For all the talk of undoing Brexit legislation, for example, the government soon discovered that wasn't at all easy. And this covers far more legislation than just being a member of the EU did. And when you consider the type of legislation it plays a critical part of, the obvious one being the Good Friday Agreement, which brought peace to Northern Ireland, is that something you want to jeopardise us so you can indulge the racist fantasy of deporting people who may have fled goodness knows what to another country? It's madness. There was talk not long ago about replacing it with a Bill of Rights that Human Rights Act hater Dominic Raab was devising, so that can't possibly have been a bad thing, could it? But that was before his own behaviour saw him kicked into touch to the back benches after this bullying scandal. And we discovered this week as well that the government has now binned his alternative to the Human Rights Act entirely. So there really isn't another option except to have no human rights at all, joining the likes of Russia and Belarus, only the kind of regimes you want to be in a club with. Besides, we're constantly told to hate Russia. Why would we want to be more like them, in which case? Would I rule the Tories out doing this anyway, as maniacal as this lot are, though? No, I wouldn't be taking that bet. Now, all of this on its own, the tears of Suella Braverman, delicious and sweet, as I'm sure they must be to see, would make for a great video, great story. Make those of us with a bit of empathy and sympathy for those fleeing war or famine feel good. The common sense seems to be prevailing, but hold on, like the ambassador with his Ferrero Rochers, I'm really spoiling you today. There's even more. Braverman may have spontaneously combusted over this one. The Court of Appeal have this morning ruled by 2 judges to 1 to overrule the High Court judgment from last December that deporting people to Rwanda, full stop, was legal. In other words, sending anyone to Rwanda now is illegal. And anybody arriving here by small boat or any other method, doesn't matter how they get here to apply for asylum, they cannot go to Rwanda now. They have to continue to be processed here. Now, Braverman is apparently being a bit tin-eared already about this one. She reckons the memorandum of understanding between the UK and Rwanda will mean this can carry on. But as a lawyer, as she supposedly is, she should know what ruled unlawful means. Basics, surely. Day 1. No flights, not one. Tear it up, you've lost. She's got an excuse to attack those woke lefty lawyers again, I suppose. Blasted lefties upholding the law and common decency, how dare they? She has wasted millions of pounds of our money on this scheme. The cost of sending people to Rwanda, some £140 million she's already given to the Rwandan government, which we pick up the tab for, of course. The flights, each flight or something was in the region of something like £169,000 per flight to send all those people to Rwanda. Now, that's all money we'll save, I guess. The ruling is centred around the fact Rwanda is not a safe third country, as has been repeatedly refuted by the Tories, despite the list of human rights abuses in recent years, there being a long one. Asylum seekers there in recent years have been murdered. There is a history of refoulement. I like that word, refoulement. It's a good word there. You'd think it would apply to water companies dumping sewage in a given place for a second time, but actually it means forcibly removing asylum seekers to another country where they may not be safe. Rwanda's got a record of this, totally undermining all of Braverman's claims about the place being wonderful and safe and lovely. It was not all that long ago the country was at civil war, and currently it's on a war footing with the neighbouring DRC. So all in all, it is not a good place to be, and the appeals court judgment reflected that. When Braverman and Sunak are determined this is a safe place, despite the court's ruling against them, disagreeing entirely with them, it's time they faced reality, but neither will. Both need sacking off. They're both wicked, incompetent failures who care nothing for others and should be nowhere near positions of power. And after you've liked, shared and subscribed to the channel, now that I've put you in this wonderfully delightful mood for the rest of your evening, check out this video recommendation here to stay with the channel a while. Where another good reason this is dead in the water now is the cash Braverman and co look set to make from the deportations. A cash for humans scheme, as it was exposed to be also, if you like. And I'll catch you on the next video, I hope. Cheers, folks.